that one up. And let's see, we've got this and that, and off we go. And here we are, Charles Moskowitz, Monday through Friday, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the flagship station, which is YouTube, but all of the other subscribing platforms. Gary Goldman's my guest. Gary is a host of financial advice and political program right here at WCRN in Worcester, Boston. Gary, how are you?
Doing well. How are you, Charles?
I'm pretty good. So I guess that the economic news coming out now is that the Federal Reserve is acknowledging that we're moving into an inflationary period, that interest rates are going up on mortgages, which of course affects Massachusetts. Could you give me a little overall analysis of where you think we are nationally, but more specifically here in Massachusetts?
Well, I think for the time being, for the short term, and I'm going to preface short to medium term for the next 6 to 12 months, I really think we're okay. I think it's going to hold its own. I think, we got a very strong real estate market out there because of lower rates. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of demand out there. There's still the migration of people that aren't sure if they want to stay in the city since COVID and move out. So I think we're going to have some of that going forward. I think the bigger problem here in the state, Charles, is everyone, I'm very happy we're starting to open things up again. Businesses are opening up. But as I think we've talked about in the past, I don't think we felt the full impact of COVID yet. Right. Businesses are going to open. They may not have the cash flow to stay open to keep it going. Restaurants, especially, that full capacity, but full capacity isn't full capacity. And there's a lot of still cost involved. So I think we're going to have to see how that plays out. The tax revenue surely isn't there. Over the last year or so. I know that the governor, from what I read, has some federal money, and the rainy day fund is there, but we need to generate tax revenue and to be successful. There's a lot of things going on. There's still the state police, we could name a number of things, infrastructure repairs that have to be done. And I think, the question is, how soon do we get people back to work, and what is the new norm going to look like? Because the more people that stay home that aren't working, it has that ripple effect on the businesses surrounding these corporate centers. And a lot of those places, if you've been downtown Boston, I'm sure you have, at times during the week, it still looks like a ghost town.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about. I mean, maybe it seems sort of anecdotal, but it looks to me like in my neck of the woods, which is Boston, and Brookline and some of the surrounding towns. I live in Boston itself proper, but it looks to me like there's a lot of boarded up storefronts. There's a lot of restaurants that are gone, including some pretty big ones. And that's not going to come back. That could take years to come back, I would think.
I think it is. Yeah, it's going to take years because nobody's really sure what the landscape is going to look like. And again, how many of the businesses in town, Charles, are going to open up and bring everybody back? Everyone loves this, remote work, and I think there's going to be some sort of formula between remote work and going to the office. But that does change the landscape. Before people are willing to start opening new restaurants or opening new businesses, they want to see how things play out. And that just brings into account that whole commercial real estate market. I've talked to friends that are in that business, and nobody's sure what that's going to look like. I think a lot of real estate investors are starting to probably take some precautions and look at alternatives, but I think that it's a long way off before we know how that plays out.
No, that's an interesting thing to bring up because, I mean, any kind of a crisis like the pandemic, there's going to be social and economic repercussions and changes. And I think one of the social changes is going to possibly be a long-term impact on the commercial real estate market, in that big companies no longer are going to be going into these huge high-rise office towers that were built in downtown Boston, I think in Worcester too, and because the companies don't have to. I mean, people want to stay home for at least two out of 3 days a week. There's a lot of talk about the 4-day work week. companies can save a ton of money by not going into those big buildings, and people don't want to go anyway. So I think that there may be some real, genuine social change in that people aren't going to want to go back to punching the time clock 5 days a week in an office. They might want to go in a couple of times a week for sure, but that's going to have a huge impact, especially since just before the pandemic, the city of Boston and probably other big cities were having a huge boom in commercial real estate construction. So you might be onto something on that. Who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can still see the cranes throughout the skyline of Boston. I mean, there's still stuff under construction. And look at it socially. I'm not sure people feel comfortable going up and down elevators anymore.
That's true too.
I mean, there's so many elements of this, and we're going to look at it's interesting because everybody's affected, Charles, and people I'm not sure understand exactly how impact. If you're any type of service business, these companies are being pushed right now. Reduce your costs. I don't have full tenancy in the building. I don't have full tenants. We've got to reduce our costs. And as the population of the building goes down, maybe all of their services aren't needed. So there are a lot of things that play into this that we're going to have to see how it works out. But at a minimum, I still think it's a good year before we really know where we are.
Oh, yeah, for sure, at least.
And look, we have to hope and pray that these vaccines are effective. And we're not sure what the process is. Just, are we going to have to be revaccinated? What is the situation? And I think come fall and winter, I think, we have a little outbreak of the normal flu. People are going to panic. I mean, there's a lot of psychological impact to COVID-19 that I don't even think we've seen yet.
No, that's right. Although I will say that I think so far the indications around the vaccine are encouraging in that there's evidence that it does prevent a reinfection or at least a serious one. So, the bottom line is that, so far it'll save your life because, you're not going to, plus the actual fatality rate for COVID is extremely low. It's coming out now. It's like less than 1% unless you're over 75 and you're obese, you have existing conditions. There are some states, particularly Florida, that never actually shut down, and they're booming. And Texas is now completely reopened. They're saying it's your personal responsibility to take precautionary measures, like if you want to wear the mask or keep social distance. But as a matter of state policy, they're open. And the result is that they're booming. Isn't that going to affect Massachusetts at some point and some of the really hardcore
I think it already has. I think you're seeing the governor loosen up on restrictions, I think, a lot faster than even I anticipated. I've been critical of the governor in regard to a lot of this. And it was several weeks ago when he went from like 20% capacity to full capacity in restaurants. He even caught me off guard. So I think he's feeling the pressure of, look, we've got to get commerce back into the state. It's summertime. We've got to get tourism back into the state, whether it's and the surrounding states as well. I mean, look at New England's a beautiful place to be year round, but the summer months on the shores of New England, and it's the Cape and the North Shore here, it's big. And in the city, we want people within the city. So I think he's feeling the pressure. Though I think the governor has his own thought process in regard to this. I don't think he would have loosened up restrictions if he didn't feel good about it. But I think he also realized it's time to do it. And when you look at Florida, and I have relatives and friends in Florida, the COVID rate for a state that is open is as good, if not better, than some states that completely closed down. So this is a tough one to figure, Charles.
Well, it hasn't. And by the way, Connecticut is also leading the way for the so-called blue states to open because they started opening within days of Texas. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it has proven statistically that Florida has had no more, and if anything, has had less mortality and infection than the big shutdown states like New York and Illinois and California. One of the little sidebars to that one is that the Florida governor set up special nursing homes for COVID patients, which were well equipped to handle COVID, unlike New York governor who put COVID patients into nursing homes and thus infecting.
And here in Massachusetts, our nursing home statistics don't look that great.
No, I'm sure they don't.
And the other part of this, which I hope at some point we can really get the truth and figure out how many people. Look at I've had friends and relatives that have died from COVID. It's real. It's no joke.
Oh yeah, no, it's
there's a financial advantage for hospitals marking off COVID.
There is, and that's, by the way, changing, because I think the CDC is now coming out and revising some of that statistic, in that they actually got an incentive if someone even had a little smidgen of COVID, but they passed away from natural causes or cancer or something else, they would mark it off as COVID. Now that to me, I think that's something that's changing, and that the numbers obviously were inflated. I don't know why, but they were.
Yeah, and I think because I at some point I would like to see what that adjusted. But we adjust everything on a monthly basis after we get a report. I'd like to see that, what the real adjustment is. And I understand the incentives. Talking to people in the medical field and hospitals, difficult. They make their money on elective surgeries, and when hospitals cannot perform elective surgeries, can't allow them to close down. So I think there could have been a way to financially take care of hospitals without making it an incentive, just so we could see the true numbers. But that's
right. Well, not to mention the fact that hospitals actually, because of the lockdown, people did not get medical procedures that they should have possibly, or certainly would have otherwise gotten. So now it turns out that the Biden administration is raising taxes across the board, including people who earn $200,000 a year, which is something they promised they would not do. And that's going to affect the economy. That's on a national basis. You mentioned that Massachusetts isn't getting the revenue that they otherwise would have gotten, obviously, so they're going to have to do something to keep up the level of public services. Do you think this state's going to raise taxes? And if so, on whom and how?
I mean, first of all, the Biden tax increase is the first one, I think, what I read in like 30 years. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But this is not the time to raise. I know we need revenue. We need revenue to, by opening things up and getting commerce back up and running. I think it's a poor time to increase taxes on people. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the state of Massachusetts. There's that old revenue versus what are they going to increase taxes on? What are they going to increase fees on? There's that called carbon tax that they're still, I believe, talking about. So it's going to be interesting what they do. But if revenue numbers fall short and they don't see the movement in commerce, they're going to figure a way to increase taxes. Just they have to.
And they're going to try to do it quietly. Like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they've already sunsetted or gotten rid of the marriage deduction on your federal taxes, which is why people are now filling out their taxes and realizing that they're not getting quite back as much as they thought they were going to get. And that has to do with some sneaky things like that, which are being phased out, and the so-called loopholes are being closed. So that's a tax increase. I mean, that's
anytime they take something like that deduction away, it is a tax increase. So it doesn't necessarily have to, I think my point is, it doesn't have to be everyone's getting an X% tax increase. By manipulating the tax code, they're increasing the taxes.
That's right. They've lowered. I think they lowered the bracket on what they consider wealthy.
Right. And look, at the Biden administration said, certain groups were not going to get any tax increases of tax just by going up on the federal gasoline tax.
That's
a tax increase. I mean, we could sit and have a check. We could make a checklist up all day. The bottom line is we need to get the economy strong. And part of that strength is to make people feel secure about it. If we're nitpicking, or the government's nitpicking and looking for tax money and fees while people are trying to restart their business and get things back to normal, it's not going to help. I've talked to a lot of business people, and they're telling me, you know what, I'm at that point. I didn't want to close, or I didn't want to sell, or I didn't want to get out of this, but I think I'm going to, because after the COVID, they've had enough, and they'll find something else to do. We don't want that, because we lose so much in that type of environment, that knowledge of wealth, that transfer of that knowledge of that business and the jobs and everything. It's just not great for the society. But I think business people are smart. They know in order for the government to maintain what it has to increase taxes one way or another. Or
sure.
Fees. And look at just opening the border, and they're going to start flowing these individuals to different states.
It's going to cost a fortune.
The federal government's going to help. The state government gets hit with a lot of that, and the local municipalities. So that there's a lot coming our way, Charles. And that the uncertainty, I think, is going to create a little hiccup in the market sooner or later.
I would think so. I mean, and I think it already has. I mean, the Dow Jones is actually a little bit down over the past couple of days, and
Yeah,
the influx of new immigrants, however that may happen, is going to hurt the labor market at a time when it's vulnerable. It's going to cost the taxpayer on so many levels, both directly and indirectly, in terms of the expense of assimilating new people into the country and economy. There's all the bigger questions about who's coming in, all that disease-wise, whether they're terrorists. Those are the serious questions. So that, and I think that the increase in the cost of gas through a tax and through the diminution of the America's, positive balance of energy due to the cancellation of things like the XL pipeline, that's very regressive in that, if it costs more in gas to get from point A to point B, that's bad enough, but it also costs more for trucks to get from point A to point B, which means that the cost of food and goods and services are going to go up because that cost has to be passed on.
I think we're starting to see it already. When you look at how much gasoline, at least $1 plus it's since this administration took over, people were enjoying that because it was helping with their budget. And there's no reason we should be putting ourselves in this position. I mean, the whole energy topic is something that this country is going to have to address and discuss. And this administration is going to have to really explain to the American people why they made a decision like that. The cost of fuel is one thing, Charles, shutting down the pipeline. The jobs alone that are going to be lost. It's absolutely absurd. And I'm all for alternative energy. I just don't believe alternative energy is the source that's going to run everything in this country. And to think that's going to be, it may someday in the future, but right now in the short and medium and even some long term, that's not going to happen. And we're kidding ourselves, but we were doing well as a net exporter of energy, and now you see where the numbers are going. It's scary to think where it's going to put us 6 months or a year from now. Every cost is going to go up, whether it's a service or whether it's a product that you store. It's heading up just because of the price of fuel.
No, it's true. And I mean, there's a big place for alternative energy, and I think it's a good idea for the government to incentivize it, but it's not there yet technologically. No. It has to get there organically over time through invention and through development and investment, but you can't force that. You can't simply send out a decree declaring it there because it ain't there, as we saw recently in Texas, by the way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have friends that had just moved to Texas and, told me exactly what was happening. And, alternative energy is great, but if you're going to have alternative energy, you better have something to, make sure the motors on your units aren't freezing if it turns cold. And secondly, people think if that source goes down, you flick a switch and the light plants can start working again. That's a whole process. It doesn't work that way. So look at it. As unfortunate as that is or was, I think it taught us a lesson. And I think we're going to have to do a little more thinking hard about how we're going to implement alternative energy. And if we do implement, have the right backup sources available. Never mind how energy is supplied to the state of Texas. That's all on the record.
Well, that's a big subject. And there was also a lot of talk about the fact that the Biden administration actually put down a directive telling them that they could not rev up their power plants over a certain amount, even though there was an emergency.
Right.
Which, of course, was terrible and a disaster for people. What about what's going on in the great city of Worcester? I know that you broadcast in one of your big areas. I know that they had this thriving nightlife and restaurant district over at Shrewsbury Street. They have the Polar Center, which is bringing in the baseball, and everyone's looking forward to that. Yep. Are they coming? Is it coming back? Is it going to be okay?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in and out of Worcester on occasion. I did dine there a lot pre-COVID, Shrewsbury Street and other places. But people that I know at the station or other friends have told me that it's starting to come back. Look I think the people in Worcester are, politicians or elected officials are a bit concerned because they were on a roll. I think that the Paw Sox are going to help, and I think hopefully, I think Worcester State a great alternative when I don't know if you've been out there in any period. There's a lot of great building going on.
It's fantastic.
Commercial. and I think it will be good in time. But again, it depends just which way the economy going, because it doesn't take much to throw that type of growth off kilter. You know what I mean? If you're now competing, if east of Worcester starts dropping their prices because of whatever, that makes it more difficult for the city, investors to go into Worcester and compete.
Sure, but it's still a great alternative to Boston.
It's a
in
great
many ways.
alternative to Boston.
And
there's a lot to do in Worcester.
And it has tremendous housing, and some of the architecture is very interesting, and it's unknown. It's like one of these unknown gems that you can get there, and for maybe $300,000 actually own a place and have a reasonably good standard of living there. That's a lot better than Boston. So
yeah, and it's accessible. Obviously the issue whenever I talk to somebody about Worcester is still, why did the airport end up where it is, or why is the Mass Pike go? But all in all, I think it's a great city, and I think it's come a long way. There's a lot to do in Worcester, and I think again, just the fact that the Red Sox invested in that stadium there, the former Pawtucket Sox, I think is big, and I think that's over time that's only going to grow and help the city.
Oh, absolutely. It's huge there. People love that. And it's a great stadium, by the way. So, Gary, you are doing a daily program now at WCRN?
No, I'm still on Saturdays. We're on CRN. We're on WACE in Springfield, 1200 Talk in Boston, 1370 AM and 99.9 FM in Manchester, and 1310 AM and 100.5 FM in Portland, Maine. So we're on like 6 stations now in New England.
So you're syndicated all over New England now. So that's huge.
Yeah, and I'm looking at some, time as we go forward, some potential daily shows. But you just have to grow this, and in the midst of COVID, a little more difficult, as you know. You got to get advertisers and sponsors, and but it's going well. The show's well received, and going very well.
And I think that generally conventional radio is doing it better overall. And maybe, and there was concern that podcasts like what I'm doing might compete, but that's not been true. I mean, generally that seems to be a symbiotic thing, and that it's getting more and more people used to the idea of listening to talk.
Right. I think they go hand in hand, because I'll listen. I'm a talk radio junkie. I'll listen all over the country, but then I'll go to a particular person who has a show, their website, and listen to some of their podcasts. So I think they work hand in hand. And I'm not sure talk radio is going anywhere soon, unless someone decides to pull the switch on us.
No, I mean, there's still something absolutely pure about the idea of turning on the switch and getting it live right off the street. When you're driving in the car, hearing some guy call in and shoot their mouth off. There's nothing like that. It's almost like listening to a private phone call.
No, you're right. And
it's unbelievable.
The best, and we try to have great content, but the callers make the show.
Oh, they do.
And there's nothing better than callers. And, one of my mantras is, if you're right, left, or somewhere in the middle, we want to talk to you. Never leave anybody out, because you know what? We may not agree, but you still learn something. You may not want to admit it all the time, but the more you have conversation with people, the more you learn. You're never done learning in life.
Oh, I mean, that's like the late, great Rush Limbaugh. He would always put the liberal on the front of the line. And he would take them on in a respectful way. I mean, he would really have he'd go pretty deep. He would really get into a topic. And of course, it makes me think of the late, great Jerry Williams, right? One of the founders, the pioneers. He would, the lifeblood of the show. I mean, that man could sit down for 3 hours with no guests, just swing open the phone lines, and it was brilliant. Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I used to sneak the transistor radio in my bed when it was on at night, and listen to him. He was on at night at one point, I think even on B's. I don't remember. Then I know at the end he was on, I believe, RKO, but
he was
great.
Do you remember when he took on Michael Dukakis?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. And then he had the governors.
Yeah,
that was hilarious and amazing.
I remember before I had my driver's license, Charles, I made one of my siblings. He was at a mall somewhere, and I wanted to see his show live. I made them drive me there to see him, and it was like incredible. Because what you saw, what you heard on TV was what you were visually seeing. There was no frills. He was who he was.
And a lot of people got their start, I think, from that, including Jim Browdy and Barbara Anderson and some other people. Carr. I mean, Howie Carr. That's right. Although Howie Carr kind of shafted Jerry, that's okay.
Yeah.
but what can you do? I mean, it's a difficult business.
Yeah, no.
But he was a great man.
Great radio. Brudnoy, there's a lot of them we could go through.
Oh, yeah. David Brudnoy was incredible. Talk about intellect. I mean, he could just shoot into an issue and explain it in a very lucid way as a professor, but yet you connected with it. It wasn't like, too hoity-toity. I mean, he would get to the point.
Yeah.
And Gene Burns, great man.
Gene Burns, oh yeah, gentleman. He was a gentleman.
Yeah, he was great.
He was great.
He crossed the meridian.
Look, we have to keep it going, John.
We do.
We have to keep it going.
We do.
You can't let it dissipate, and because look, you can tell by callers and just I get emails after every show.
I recently, you should have him on, Gary. I recently had on Jordan Rich, who has a book out about his career as a talk show host. And he came out. We had a great time. You should contact him.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm having a meeting with Jordan on Tuesday regarding some stuff. Cool. So he works with the group from CRN, and I am going to speak to him about having him on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Reading his book. I started reading his book the other day.
Yeah, a great guy. Really, one of the veterans of talk. So since you delve into more than just economic questions, you go into politics. I need to just ask a couple of quick questions.
Go ahead.
What do you see in terms of the horse race nationally and in Massachusetts for the upcoming midterm election, which is actually only months away?
It's actually only months away. Look, I think we're going to see. First of all, after this year, it's hard to predict anything. But with that said, there's a lot of people out there with some buyer's remorse right now. What they were sold and what they have. I'll leave it at that for now. But I think you're going to see the Republicans take the Senate back. I truly believe that. And we'll see what happens with the House. And the Republicans have to get out of their own way and figure out what their platform is and stop the bickering amongst each other and stop trying to just come up with short-term plans for long-term problems. And, there's a little too much, of they like Trump, they don't like Trump. And I think even former President Trump, if you're going to get involved, let's get involved and let's all work together. But I think they're going to we'll get the Senate back, and hopefully it'd be nice to get the House back. I think if this administration continues on the course that they're in, it will be, you're going to see a flop on the flipping things like we did when President Reagan took office, that type of thing.
Well, traditionally the midterm for the first term does go to the opposition party.
Right.
So, and the Democrats hold the House by a razor-thin margin. I think it's less than 10 seats out of 440. Now, there is growing evidence, and it should just be stated, that Joe Biden is not up to the job. I mean, he's not all that cognizant. He apparently only works a few hours a day. He comes out for one quick event, then he goes back under the lid. And that he doesn't come across as someone who is, I'm trying to be polite here, playing with a full deck. I mean, we have to say it for what it is, all right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's evidence that Kamala Harris is now being positioned to take over the office. I think it's only it could be a matter of months. It could even be a matter of weeks. Apparently, she hasn't moved into the vice president's residence. She's living at Blair House, which is like 5 minutes away from the White House. I think there's a reason for that. And, she's now making calls to foreign leaders and gradually stepping in and filling in. Because Biden is embarrassing the country and himself. Even now you have world leaders saying that he has dementia. That's not a good sign. So I think that it's almost safe to say that she will be sworn in as president probably by maybe the end of this year.
Yeah, I have some bets that will be by November.
Okay, we should ask callers or listeners to put money on this. But how do you think that's going to affect the midterms? I mean, do you think that she's not popular, but nevertheless, the power of the presidency can do a lot.
I still think I'm concerned if and when she becomes president, because I think she's, so far to the very progressive. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
And I think it's going to turn people off, and I think people are going to be scared. look at, I still wonder, regardless of it, we like Joe Biden or we don't like Biden, he was the guy, but there were a lot of other people, that could have been chosen for vice president.
Well, it was very cynical. I mean, he wanted to have a black woman. I mean, let's just be honest.
Right. Well, that's what they wanted to have.
That's what they said.
But right. even for president, there were some candidates out there that I think could have given President Trump a real run for his money. With that aside, I think the question will be who would become the vice president under Kamala Harris, and I think that's going to be a big question. But I think I don't think it's going to affect the midterms or the midterms. I think it's still the Republicans going to take it. I think the people are concerned, especially, Charles, if we see jump in inflation and the economy sputtering around and the stock market starting to do its, take some ups and downs here. I'm not sure the American people want to put up with that. And especially if it's self-inflicted, for a guy to sit down and sign all those executive orders and do the things that he's done, that's basically like continually shooting yourself in the foot. Why? Just because they did not like Donald Trump? That's absolutely absurd.
Right.
Sit there, come up with your own plan. Don't harm the country because you felt that you had to do this to keep part of your, the left happy because they disliked Donald Trump so much. They basically wanted to bring it back to the Obama years. And as I started from day one, I called this the Biden administration. Obama is somewhere pulling the strings. And I think that was the plan the whole time. We'll get Joe in there. We can move Kamala to the president. And then we'll see what happens from there. But, it's going to be interesting. And it's really tough to say what's going to happen. I just feel all the time that the Democrats always have a plan. And whether we like the plan or not, and I'm sure they have a plan going forward, but I think we're going to see them starting to vocally on all sides of the left saying, look, Joe may not be up to this job. You're going to start hearing that more and more.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's been the case since they announced that he was the candidate.
Oh, well, sure. Exactly. I mean, anybody could tell that. And I think there'll be like a little bit of a period where she's acting president and then she'll be president. And, look, you hit it on the head when you said that a lot of those executive orders were just anti-Trump. We're going to undo everything that Trump did. They don't even mention his name. And I think that's backfiring in terms of shutting down the construction of the border wall and shutting down offices in Mexico and Guatemala that were processing visa applications. Now you have what is shaping up to be a huge humanitarian disaster, a catastrophe that is unlike anything this country's seen in decades, where you have now 3,000 odd children basically put back in the cages that Obama built. They won't let the media in. They won't let them make phone calls to their parents. They won't let lawyers in. Now they're transferring them to some big arena somewhere in Denver, I think.
Dallas, Texas.
Dallas. And it's worse than that. They've, according to the Texas governor, they've apprehended up to 800 convicted criminals, including possible terrorists at the border, which tells you how many people they didn't get. So it's really backfiring on them in a big way. And I think that's going to affect everything.
They've created something that they can't slow down now because President Biden made it perfectly clear. Come into this country, come into this country, shuts down the wall construction. There's gaps in the wall. These people are just walking through.
Exactly.
We have Sheriff Mark Lamb coming on tomorrow morning from Pinal County in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And, speaking with the sheriff and reading some of the stuff that's going on along the border, it's very scary for the American people. But even so, irregardless, there's always the vetting. You got to vet. In the midst of COVID, when we haven't settled the minds of the American people, I've been reading that 50% of those entering the country that are tested are positive for COVID.
Oh my God!
They're not getting any treatment, but they're positive for COVID. So, I mean, you really have to wonder, Charles, what motivation would this administration have to do that? They have to have something somewhere up the line, even besides votes that they're looking for, because this is purely the destruction of a country that is in the midst of rebuilding after pandemic, something that we've never experienced in modern time.
Yeah, whatever happens to the masks. Anyways, and also, just to end on a rather unpleasant topic, but I need to mention it. When you're taking, thousands of children into the country with, and placing them who knows where, not with their parents, you know, this raises questions about sex trafficking and other things like that. So anyway, Gary, where can people hear you, and where can they find out about your show?
Yeah, they can find the show. They can go to WCRN.com, or they can go to my website, GaryOnBPL.com, and there's links to the show. The show airs Saturday 9 to 11 a.m.
Excellent. All right, Gary Goldman. Listen, thanks so much for joining me as always.
Thank you, Charles. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right, you too. Bye-bye. All right, Gary. Thanks so much for joining me. Bring up an unpleasant sex trafficking. Yeah, it was good. Gary Goldman said that something I thought was interesting. He thinks that the pandemic is not only causing economic changes, but social changes, and those people are not going back to. He says that it's affecting, before the pandemic in Boston, enough cities, there's a big boom in like commercial real estate in downtown. He says that there's a lot of concern now that that's not going to come back because companies don't want to spend the money they don't have. The companies don't want to spend money, and people don't want to go in 5 days. Right. And it's downsized to get the smaller offices. People are going to be sharing. Yeah. Of course. People are going to work from home and they'll go in maybe 1 or 2 days a week. And they're going to go to a communal office. That's right. They don't need anything. Does it have fixes? Yeah. But anyway, it's an interesting picture. He's having to work very moving to it. So they kind of those people that I talk to. He's a good guy to know. His show is in French. Oh, he said Worcester. They're also.
I know, it was doing good. I know. Yeah. The next thing she wants. Really? Is he out there or no? Why did I put that? Where is it now? High school. No, that was fine. No. No. I just wanted to, so, I just wanted to. But I'm like, I just told you, don't look at your phone, don't think about this. Your phone has a April 11th. Oh, you're tripping on the floor. Jesus. She can't remember, and I talked to her this morning, I said, why don't you stop putting it everywhere? Here, all this, and it's on the floor too. And you just put it on the floor again. No, you don't. Well, why don't you wait till you dump the other stuff on the floor too? Why can't you just use a scissor and do it carefully? No, you should. Just, why don't you use a scissor instead of getting those all over the place? Yeah, but you can't do it. That's it. You even getting it on this thing. Yeah, it is, and this too. It's all from. No, it just went there. Why? What did you say? Can you get me on the floor? It's, on the floor is. How much you? Oh, so I didn't throw the box out. Wait, no, that's mine. Leave that down there. Is there one in the front? Oh, leave me out. There's none left? Are you sure? Okay, sure. Well, we can watch something. I don't know. vampires. Ah, Yeah. What? What do you want? What? You're watching Jeopardy. Oh, that guy, Inception. Well, not Inception, the other one. Oh, drugs. That's right. Scary. Oh, that's right. Wrong. That's what someone's gonna do to George R. R. Martin. What? That's what someone's gonna do to George R. R. Martin. I know, right? But, is that Stephen King? What? Is that what Stephen King is? Oh. Berlin. Rents here. Well, no, well, the rents here. Hot zone, I need that. I'm gonna lose to- Yeah, right. Oh, I know, don't tell me. It was,